So a few words about Composer. Composer is not listed on Drupal.org as a dependency, but it is. It is a dependency because not only Drupal itself is managed by Composer, but also there are many modules that use Composer. So what is Composer? If you open a Composer website, it's a dependency manager for PHP. Modern websites are large libraries, large pieces of software that have different libraries in them, and libraries need to be managed their versions, because only certain version of library will work with another version of library. So there is a need for management, and PHP uses Composer mostly for this. And Drupal itself has lots of libraries that it relies on. So I'll show an example of my bundle that I use, they call Sidecat in the GitHub. If you go into the web folder, you will get into the heart of the Drupal. So this is a usual Drupal folder, except it's not. Vendor has been moved out. So let's go into a Drupal folder. We'll download it from Drupal.org, from a usual Drupal 8 folder. Download latest Drupal. And you need to click it again. For some reason, clicking once is not enough. So if you go to a Drupal folder, you will see that it has a vendor folder in it. So the vendor folder is basically a setup of libraries. So those are external libraries that Drupal uses. It would take long time to write all of them from the scratch. So it's a good practice to reuse existing professional good libraries. That's what Drupal does. It allows Drupal developers to concentrate on Drupal itself rather than reinventing the wheel. And those libraries, they're managed. There is a file called Composer JSON. It is used by Drupal and the Drupal developers to manage the libraries and keep them in sync. Inside the Composer JSON file, there is a section called name, which specifies the name of the current library. So in fact, there is a library called Drupal, which is in fact Drupal itself. There is actually a library called Drupal-core or Drupal/core for Drupal codebase. And then it has a section called requirements and configurations and different installer paths and repositories and so on. So and versions, when it specifies a library, so here is a Drupal core library and there is a version 8.3. So there are different ways. This up means higher than, this dash means within specified. So it will be within 8.3. It will install within 8.3. The biggest version within 8.3 that it finds. So basically, Drupal manages its libraries with Composer. In vendor, there is an autoload function which points to Composer, autoload function that, here it is. Basically, it maps the libraries, their classes that Drupal has, so that Drupal can load them when he needs it, or when it needs it. So what happens if you need to install the PHP mailer module? if you grab it and download it and put it into the modules folder, it won't work because it requires a PHP mailer library, which it specifies in Composer JSON. This name is a Drupal module library name, and it requires, where is that required? Here, it requires PHP mailer library of version which is bigger or equals 5 to 21. So if you just copy that module from Drupal.org and extract it to the modules folder in your Drupal installation, it will not work because it needs that library. And if you go and download that library separately and put it into the vendor folder, it also will not work because it needs to be correctly placed in the autoloader files that these are. So you see they're kind of needs to be mapped into those autoloader files, without which Drupal will not know that you have that library in the vendor folder and will not be able to handle it correctly, even if it knew that it's there. Because autoloader says which classes to load and so on and so forth. And of course, if you cannot install a module because it requires Composer, then of course Composer is a requirement. You cannot build a functional site without using Composer in Drupal 8, because any more or less usable common module will require that, will require libraries through Composer. So, and the way it is out of the box, out of the archive, like we see here, with the vendor folder and Composer JSON, it cannot handle those modules because out of the box, Drupal does not know to take these modules, Composer JSON, and add it into its own, so it will manage, because this is a system Composer JSON that it will not modify. So this basically means that if you download Drupal from Drupal.org as an archive like this, it's basically unusable to build a website. So there you go. So there have been created Composer JSON files to build Drupal in a correct way, so it works with Composer. And my Sitekit 8 bundle is built on Drupal project. So Drupal project is basically some scripts and the Composer JSON, which contains all the modules, all the references and library definitions for building a Drupal installation. Drupal installers, Drupal console, Drupal core, and Drush, Drupal Finder, and so on. Well, these are for these two, I believe, are for Drush. I mean for Drupal console, and some more libraries that it installs from the dev, and then it builds and stuff. So you can create a bare bone Drupal project with Composer from this. I will show here though how to use Sitekit, though you use it pretty much the same, this and that, so they're interchangeable, except that Sitekit is a bigger bundle. Go to clone or download. First you need to make sure that you have version 2x dev selected, because it will show master by default, and this is old. So you need to go to 2x dev and then clone or download it. you go to clone or download, go to git, clone with SSH, copy. And then there's a folder where you want to put it. And I don't usually clone, but I create a folder which I want, with the name that I want. So I go to that folder, open a terminal, git init, to init an empty repository, git remote add origin, and I add this origin which I copied. Then I do git fetch. And it will take some time for it to fetch things. And while it does, why I suggest to use that, because it has some dumps already. And it has some config already. So basically, you can have a partially configured Drupal 8 website using that dump. Also, it has some custom modules which I built. Some of them are, well, actually all of them are features. Blog feature, event feature, gallery feature, libraries feature. It basically loads the libraries, which I don't see here, which I haven't added here. We'll have to do that. So now that it's cloned, you can check out this version, 2xdev. Git check out. So okay, so here it has checked it out. If you were doing that with Drupal project, you would do everything just the same. You would add the repository of Drupal project, like here, and then do git fetch and git checkout 8.x. So also not some master, but there's no master, but just 8.x. And you check it out. And so here, there is a different structure. You see that it's based on Drupal project. So the folder where Drupal core resides is it's called web, and Drupal core is here, and modules in here. And there is composer.json file. You see it has more items in it because I already have pre-downloaded and pre-installed, pre-bundled some of the things. So basically, to install things that are in composer.json, you need to navigate to the folder where composer.json is located and do composer require. What it does is that it synchronizes codebase to this file. Composer.json is the definition file. It asks you which package. You don't specify package, just click enter, and then it uses composer.json file. So it will loop through all entries in composer.json and will install or update them. It will create a vendor folder over here. If you remember, in the Drupal archive that we downloaded, vendor folder would be here inside Drupal. It has been moved out. And it has been moved out because this way Composer can manage both the Drupal libraries and the external libraries. So you see it has found the libraries that it needed and it installs them. This is an old version. So once it finishes downloading, here it is this vendor folder with the libraries. So this vendor folder has the files, has the libraries, and web folder with the Drupal core no longer has it. So in order to, and it has composer JSON, but it's not used anymore, it's empty. Everything in it was moved out. So now this is usable by Composer. Now all dependencies, all libraries that are managed by Composer are updated by Composer. You don't do drush up anymore because that will update some of the libraries without dependencies, and they will not correspond to Composer JSON, and you will break the site. So now to update, you do Composer update with dependencies. Of course, I just installed it, so there'll be nothing else to update. When it downloads or updates the libraries, it writes into Composer log file which current versions they have installed. So it says, say, I installed a library called, which one? A library called Composer installers. I installed it from here, and so on, and it specifies the keywords, and all its information, so that it knows. So basically, Composer log is what's installed, the current status, and Composer JSON is the map that it uses. So in order to remove a library, you just need to remove the entry from Composer JSON like that, and you delete it, and then you run Composer require, and it will see that it's no longer here and will delete it. So this is how you manage it. If you need to install a PHP mailer module, if you download it, you see that it has Composer JSON file. So only those modules that have Composer JSON in them can be managed by Composer. So you see that its name is Drupal/PHP mailer, and it requires the PHP mailer library, which only Composer can manage. But if you install it, this Drupal PHP mailer, the main Drupal module. It's Composer require. If you install it, it will parse that file and see that it requires PHP mailer, and it will install this PHP mailer in the right version. So it'll take care of that. And then it will place the PHP mailer library over here. Well, could not do it, could not be resolved. Yeah, I need to update some versions, but that are hard coded. But it will place the PHP mailer in the vendor here, and it will place the module itself in the web modules contrib PHP mailer. It could not install the it could not update this version, so I need to update it manually. Okay. Composer require. Yep. Drupal Finder 3.0. It could not update it because I hard coded the earlier version. in Composer JSON. So it now looks for a newer version and will update it. And now it's installing PHP mailer and Drupal PHP mailer, and now it's all done. So it has resolved the dependencies. So now in the contrib I have PHP mailer, and in vendor I have the PHP mailer PHP library that it will use. And it has been registered in Autoloader correctly. So now I can use it. If I want to delete it, I will go into Composer JSON, but of course if it's installed in Drupal, I have to uninstall it in Drupal first, and then go to Composer JSON and find their PHP mailer. Yeah. And then I would remove it from the require section. And then if I go to update and do Composer require again, it will see that it's gone from the require section and it will delete it, which I don't want to do. So this is how it basically works. It's easy once you realize that it's just a glorified installer. It checks and installs and keeps the versions concurrent. So now what happens if you see a module or theme that does not have Composer JSON on it? Some modules and themes don't have Composer JSON, so they cannot be managed by Composer. What do you do with them? In these cases, if it's a module, you go to the modules folder, custom, and place that module into the custom folder. Even if it's from Drupal.org, you still place it here because the custom folder is not managed by Composer. And if it's a theme which doesn't have Composer JSON, you go to themes, custom, and place it in here in the custom folder, even if it's in fact from Drupal.org website. Another thing that you need to know is that there is a Gitignore, and contrib modules and themes and contrib profiles are not added to Git. So this means that if you add your website that you are developing to Git, you will realize that local PHP, settings PHP, local settings PHP files, and the contrib module and themes, as well as the Drupal core, are not there. And the vendor folder is not there. So you can say, why is it excluding that? It's excluding that because it's excluding basically everything that can be managed by Composer. So it presupposes that on the site where you put it, on the production site or on the staging site where you're moving your code base, that you will pull the code base in the custom modules and in the custom themes that you actually edited. And then you do Composer require, and all those managed things will be installed by Composer. That's why they're not in Git. There is no reason to keep them in Git if they're taken care of by Composer. Now on the live side, if you need to have Composer installed on the live side to work with it. If you don't have Composer installed on the live side, then you will just need to upload everything with FileZilla or an equivalent. Because if you pull on the live side, on the production side with Git, it won't pull that. Of course, you can also remove those lines from Gitignore. And then that code will be added to Git. which I don't do, but it's doable. So yeah, I hope you see that that Composer is actually an easy way with just a few basic commands that manages the website dependencies. And it's a requirement for Drupal 8, a hidden requirement.